All right, we're recording. There we go. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about building cross-campus collaborations through COIL and virtual international exchange. So first, I want to thank everyone for coming and also for ERAC for hosting Staff Development Day. And most importantly, thank you for our ERAC representative, Justin, who's going to keep an eye on chats. But it seems like we're going to have a small focus group, so feel free to put any questions in during the chat. Or if you want to just raise your hand, you can unmute during the presentation and bring up any questions you have. But we'll take them any way that you want to throw them at us. So to introduce ourselves, hi everyone. I'm Chris Harvey. I'm one of the senior instructional technologists here at the CITL in LTS, and I'm here with my colleague Teresa.
Hi, I'm Teresa Cusimano. I am one of the instructors in ICAPE and one of the COIL instructors that has worked with Chris now for the past couple of years.
Yeah, perfect. So before we get started, I just wanted to throw out a few quick definitions of things that we're talking about, just because you know how in higher ed we love throwing acronyms everywhere. So I wanted to start off. So a few things that we're going to be talking about. So virtual international exchange is really any tech-supported exchange in the classroom that has, I'm going to frame this in the Lehigh perspective, that has a Lehigh class working with an international class at any partnering institution. And it's VIE, Virtual International Exchange, is an umbrella term for, it could be anything from, you know, asynchronous, just your students are sharing a message board with international students, or it could be more involved with like multi-week collaboration, which would lead us to COIL, which is collaborative online international learning. So that's where both the students and the professors work collaboratively. So the professors do a lot of the work before the semester, but then also as they're going through the COIL module, it can be anywhere from, what would you say, Teresa, about 3 weeks to the whole semester if you really wanted to, but typically more like 4 through 8. Have students working together, project-based learning. And then we're also going to be talking about CHILL, which is, it's a COIL, but with a hybrid component, so it has a travel component added in. So those are just, if you see acronyms pop up, those are what we're referring to.
It does get confusing, so just ask if at any time.
Yeah, yeah.
We get confused.
Right. It's taken us, Teresa and I have been doing this for about 3 years together now, and still there's times where we're fumbling over our various acronyms. But then to talk about cross-campus collaboration. So why is it important? It's one of those things that, you know, we have so many awesome departments and resources here across campus that it's like, for me, it's like, makes sense. Let's try to use all this expertise that we have around. So you get to share resources between one another and limit duplicative efforts, which a lot of times, you know, when you start talking with other departments, you realize it's like, oh, we're either interested in the same or similar things, or we're doing the same or similar things. So like, why don't we combine those efforts? Where you really get to showcase off the departmental expertise. There's a lot of times when people reach out to me on certain things, I'm like, I can help you with that, but actually I know people who can do an even better job. So bringing in more expertise across campus, but then to help foster experiential learning on campus and offer volunteering opportunities, and using this also as a way to promote, you know, Lehigh community engagement, but then also the outside of Lehigh community engagement. And so cross-campus collaboration can look like a lot of things. So we have just this little chart to show off the different levels of commitment. And these are just a few of the possibilities that came to mind, but really, I'm sure that, you know, we could fill out multiple slides with all of this, but starting with attending events across campus for the various, you know, various departments, various programs that are going on. Sometimes just being there is great for, you know, with what Teresa and I are talking about, it's student focused. Students love seeing when the campus is involved in the clubs and offerings that they have. Then the next step is a little more hands-on and a little more of a time commitment, but volunteering to help with the various efforts across campus, or hosting one. And later on, Teresa and I were going to give a bunch of examples about how some wonderful departments really helped our COIL by hosting events. And then the largest level of commitment is being on a planning committee for something like a COIL or an event or things like that. Or something that we're going to talk about shortly is creating or joining a community of practice. While the visual here is to show off the different levels of commitment, I did want to acknowledge that the levels of impact, they are all super important and impactful. So if you just have a few minutes to stop at an event and see, I was thinking like an example, Teresa is the chair for one of the student groups on campus, International Voices, where students show off their art and poetry. Just going to an event for, if you have a half hour to see the students reading their poetry or seeing their artwork, it's super impactful. So I wanted to acknowledge that just because the different time commitments looked at the different sizes, they're all super important. So I'm going to hand it off to Teresa now to talk about what a community of practice is.
So I'm going to speak kind of in generally with what we did with OIA and CITL for our community of practice, which I think, if I'm correct, Chris, correct me, we just started this as kind of new last spring. It's not even a year old, I don't think.
Yeah, it's not even a year old. I think we started the initial planning late summer.
Right. So we formed this community of practice because we all had a common goal, right? So between CITL, Office of International Affairs, and ICAPE, we're looking to internationalize education, utilize technology to make that possible. And that's why we formed this community of practice. This is something you could do within your own department. And just as Chris was talking, I was thinking, Elizabeth, of the library and what you guys did for us this year. It was such a huge group effort, right? Between you and Heather and Ilhan coming together to create an exhibit for my COIL class and the COIL class that visited campus here. So even in there, I could see as part of the library, a big, a community of practice on working with these international students and COIL courses that are starting to increase in number on campus. But the reason we did the community of practice is that we could, one, bring together all of our experience, my experience in the classroom, and Chris and Peggy with the technology, and Mark with the administrative, and Stacy as all the contacts worldwide with all our different partners. So bringing all that together in a one room, I think really made it possible for us to grow our COIL into a chill, right? Mm-hmm. So we took that COIL class that we've done now for a couple of years, and we added in that experiential learning through this community of practice. And I think having that effort, really helping connect people, sharing knowledge that we all have, so we're not duplicating things, opening up a dialogue to what will benefit students in the end, because that's really why we're doing all of this. Like, what is going to be the most meaningful experience for them? And my class is a composition class, so English 3 or 5 or English 1 or 2. And I don't know if you have the same experience, but most of my students are in my class because they have to be, right? So they're not taking writing classes, most of them, because they love to write and they love to read. They're there because it's a requirement. So if I can use the COIL and through working with this community of practice to somehow make that required, that gateway course, more engaging for them, I am all for that. And that's what I think is the biggest benefit of a community of practice, is that we really can share information, share ideas, and in the end get, create these experiences for Lehigh students. So what is the BI community of practice? We kind of, I talked about that, but we look at everything that's been done in COIL. So as part of our community of practice, Chris and Stacy and I have attended courses through Florida International University. Mark and Stacy have traveled to different conferences on this. Chris and I have done our own individualized training through SUNY in Buffalo, I believe, is the really the main, they're the go-to for COIL. If you want more information on this, they're who you should go to. But we really learned to implement different methodologies, ways that we could pull in, even creating and building these partnerships with USFQ, which I think now has become a really well-established partnership. And we've done that through the community of practice, right? We've had some of their technology specialists, right, Chris? I think Claudia
Mhm.
or visit. I don't know if any of you were able to meet with Claudia when she was here from USFQ. They've traveled to Lehigh to try and see ways that we can strengthen our partnerships. And the biggest thing that I think that I've seen come out of this community practice is that we're getting the word out to students. And we need the Lehigh campus to do that, right? Because when they log into Banner and they're signing in for courses and they see 50 different sections of English 1 and English 3, they don't know what is a COIL and what isn't sometimes, right? So they're just picking what fits their schedule, and they might be missing out on a really meaningful opportunity. So that's the other goal of this community of practice, is trying to get the word out to students and across campus that these opportunities exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and like how Teresa covered of, you know, this methodology that we're trying to promote at Lehigh, it takes a lot to get it going. So we identified, and it's very helpful. Like I want full disclosure of, before being here at LTS, I was at Office of International Affairs for 5 years. So we already had that partnership, that working together underway. But we identified like the three of the areas that of support to get something like a virtual exchange off the ground in the classroom. And it was partnerships, international partnerships of, you know, who do you want to work with? What countries do you want to work with? How do you connect with them? Because if you're on your own on that, it seems like, I guess I could send, you know, exploratory emails, but it's like we have a global partnership department on campus that manages these connections. And then in the classroom, the pedagogical methodology with Teresa and Mark from ICAPE. So, you know, that they have experience working with international students in the classroom. So when we're reaching out to professors about, hey, do you want to add an international component to your class? We have two people that are very familiar, and this is what they do. And then on the tech interaction side of it, but then also tied with the pedagogy is from the CITL. So myself, and then also the director of the CITL, Peggy Kane, is a member of the community of practice. So we identified like the pain point areas and identified the most important areas to get something off the ground. So it's like, hey, we're thinking about this, come talk with us to help you think about this, and then working on filling in the blanks and the structure and how we can really develop all these the different fronts to get this off the ground for your class.
And the nice thing about this community of practice, or any community of practice, if you choose to set one up yourself, is that if there's a question, so we've worked with a couple of different professors the spring semester, trying to help them set up their own COILs. And two of them have, right, Chris? I think Rudy Schenker, he launched his in the spring.
Yep.
Jessica Harbum will be launching hers in the fall. And she will be working with me because we're actually expanding to 2 sections for the English 3 COIL. So that will be open to English 1 students and English 3 students. But the nice part about this community of practice, that if a question comes in or somebody needs some mentoring and I can't help them, well, I can always go to this and figure out, all right, who's the best person, right? And it's not passing the buck, it's getting you the answers that you need, right, to get engaged with students, to become more active in the classroom, you know, as quickly as possible. And I think we've been really successful with that. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So to continue the example, Teresa's going to keep talking about how we actually use this in the classroom.
So my goal really here today, my main point is that this is an open invitation, right? Anyone who is here, and I thank, like I know Elizabeth, I can only see you in the squares there. Elizabeth has come into my classroom and spoken with my students in Ecuador and my students here at Lehigh about concepts about academic integrity and ideas around plagiarism, because they do differ culturally, right? I mean, sometimes it's a lot for international students to wrap their head around if this is not a concept from, you know, that they grew up with, or, you know, that they had prior in school. So I appreciate getting that expertise from other people. We talk about in class, typically the classes that I do will have a theme. So the one for the spring coming up is going to be health related, because we're partnering with the College of Health. We are partnering with Study Abroad, Passport to Success, and a bunch of other people on campus. So I'm not an expert on some of these things, right? So what we did we were talking about global citizenship, and I invited Lena Rodriguez to come into class and talk to our students about what is global citizenship, right? When you look online, and even Lena herself will say sometimes it's very hard to define. So I invited her in, and she was wonderful to come in and talk to them about what it is, right? Before they're doing all this research and readings and class discussions, I want them to have a clear, definition, right? Clearly defined goals when looking for, these concepts of global citizenship. And I tap into the resources we have here on campus. I think the next one, Chris, is Stacy Brennan. Yes, so you'll see more pictures from what Stacy has done. So Lena was working with us online, which is fine because the COIL students, some of them are online, some of them are in the classroom. It's hybrid. So whatever is convenient for you or your department, if you have an idea that you think you could bring to my class, I would welcome that. But you could do it in any format you want. So first, Stacy did this presentation on art. We were looking at equity. And one of the things this picture reminds me, I don't know if you were there that day, Chris, but we looked at this picture and I just kind of saw like this little house in the back and this, like, I don't know, I thought moonlight or something. And one of my other students, he was from, I think he was from China. He instantly knew that something, he saw his gut reaction to this photo was that there was something ominous about it. And it actually is a picture of some kind of military raid. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't see that. So I was so grateful when Stacy came in because she really opened up this discussion and talked about how we interpret things and how visual imagery based upon our prior experiences. And it was such a wonderful discussion of the artwork. And it was something that she took it to a level that I could not have done, right? I mean, it's not my expertise. So I really did appreciate that. You want to go to the next one, Chris?
Yeah, perfect. So those were examples of with online with our COIL, just having the community interact with the students online. But then now we're going to cover everything we did with the hybrid component. So the online one only was 2 years ago or last year. The chill was this past semester.
And this was down in 379, right? The little area downstairs over there.
Yep, in the Siddle Commons area, 379.
Yeah, and you can see my partner is wearing the yellow shirt over on the left, my left side of the screen there. She is actually the teacher from USFQ in Quito, Ecuador. So she was traveling here. This was a pilot program this semester, both for ICAPE and for USFQ. We've not done an exchange before. And this is literally the first time these students have met. And you could see, I don't think they look, I mean, you could see that they know each other and they're friendly with each other already. They had worked together for 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks as part of.
I think it was 5 weeks at that point, yeah.
Yeah, I think this was the 6th week during their spring break. And they came over here, and it was so funny because even as the USFQ students were walking around campus, they came back to my office and they were so excited because they had seen and recognized their classmates from working online. So I thought that was a wonderful experience for them.
Yeah, and to show off the like the departments on campus. So in this picture of students collaborating, we had study abroad and Office of International Students and Scholars to help with getting the students here in it. ICAPE teaching the English course. We're in a CITL room, and at this part, we were doing a workshop on the technology that the students were going to be using in the class. We had them make 360 immersive essays, so we taught them how to design things in virtual reality. And we also worked with the digital media studio to get the equipment. So it's like just in this one picture, we had 5 or 6 departments on campus just to make it happen.
Everybody working. So what we were doing is we were rotating students in and out of between the classroom to the VR studio. Then Chris and Peggy and Tara were helping with the VR, and Steve. While they were also, Chris was also doubling down, trying to help them with the uptail. But it was really an all hands on deck class, and it was a wonderful experience. It really was.
Yeah, and those immersive essays that we're talking about, Teresa designed a project where they were talking about gender identity in dramatic plays. So then for when they're on campus, Teresa had the students go on a tour at Zollner. We
were traveling into New York City to see Bad Cinderella. So we were looking at gender identity and gender issues as they're represented in drama and how that impacts society. So before we went to New York City, we were able to do this backstage tour at Zollner, which was, I mean, even for me, it changed my experience as a theater goer, right? So, and the students, it was a 40-minute tour, but it really had such a huge impact on the way they viewed the play. Elizabeth was great that day. And then this was through Bill Hunter and Elena Reese in front of the UN. We were invited to travel with them into New York City that day and attend the UN. Lehigh students were presenting at the UN on gender issues and gender equity globally. Mm-hmm. So that again, that just added to my class because that was our theme, and it was an opportunity that arose because Bill and we were at a meeting and we were talking about COIL. So it was just like an opportunity that he happened to be there that day, and it worked out wonderfully for my students.
Yeah. And
there's Stacy. Right, we went over while the students from USFQ were here. We went over and we were touring Zollner. They had the Himalayan art exhibit was open there. That was really important. But this is a small Narratives of Love was a small student exhibit that was in the studio at the same time. And that's what I really wanted my students to take a look at, with these different ideas of gender and love and the impact that it has on our lives. And of course, they got to experience this whole other exhibit, which was wonderful. I know the students really loved it. Kiki was so impressed. Before she left, I went and I got her one of the singing bowls because they just had such a good time. It was a hands-on experience. They were able to interact with the exhibit and with Stacy and the volunteers in Zollner. So it was a great class.
And then the week after we had the USFQ students here, Teresa and I were able to take our Lehigh students down to Ecuador, which was great because then they got to work with the students that weren't able to travel. But we chose some of these images to show with cross-campus collaboration. So we showed the Lehigh side of it, but also a lot of the events at USFQ were using their various departments on campus. So we were able to work with their version of the CITL and Digital Media Studio to have the students use, you see the VR headsets back here, they were able to experience the environments that they were creating, as well as the, I forget the title of it, but we have it here on campus. There's a wonderful Martin Luther King experience that's totally in VR. So we had them experience both of those.
Traveling while Black.
Yes, well, no, that one, and then, but then we have the Martin Luther King one as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So here.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
I just wanted to say that while we were at USFQ, and this is kind of where you come in, I had never been there. It was my first time traveling there. And the students, Chris and I would be walking around trying to find out where to go. After a week there, we still would get lost. But the students, they had it down within a couple of days. But there were some of the instructors there at USFQ were so gracious about just letting them kind of join in, like these opportune moments. Chris and I were walking around and they were doing judo. They were taking a judo class. The instructor was holding this outside in their kind of like open quad area there. And the students got involved. He just invited them in to do it. And it was such a small little thing, but they loved it. And one of the students told me that it was all about mind, body, and empowerment. That's what she said. And I thought that has a lot to do with gender. And it was just an experience that they won't forget. So just somebody's open invitation made a really huge impact that day.
For sure. Yeah, and then we worked with, they have a fairly new department there that's focused on service learning. So we took the Lehigh students and some of their USFQ counterparts to a shelter in downtown Quito. I think that they had 150 rooms for homeless in the city of Quito. So they watched a presentation, but then also got to do some hands-on. Here we're cleaning, these are crates that they used to carry food. But then we also had students do various things like fold overnight kits for people that weren't able to stay in the shelter, but were in Quito's, and also they offer prepared food. So this was a great experience for the students to kind of see, be a little more hands-on. So while we had them out in Ecuador, also seeing everything, learning more about the city and everything like that.
One student told me after this that she never would have done that on her own, but she said that now that she's done it, she would not be afraid to volunteer like that. So I think just seeing that how one person can make such a huge difference. And I looked around here. I would have loved to have gotten students involved in volunteering more here on campus, but that is definitely an area that I don't have as many of the connections. So again, that's why we're inviting you. I mean, if you work with a department here at Lehigh that does volunteerism, and you could think of a project that you could use 20 or 30 students to help out, I would love to talk to you. I would love to find out more opportunities for them when they're actually here on campus, which will be again in the spring next semester.
And then finally, we had them present online to people. We'll present to both people at USFQ, but then also online at Lehigh to talk about, showcase their virtual reality experiences and present. And also like another just really cool thing and being open to working together. While we were down at USFQ, they had us take a tour of their archaeology area. And one of the professors there was like, oh, I would love to work with Lehigh. I come back, I mentioned it to my teammate. She's like, I think I have a professor that might work. So I reached out to a professor in our sociology department, and he's like, you messaged me when I was planning my fall course about archaeology of Latin America. So yes, please, that would be wonderful. So his students are going to be learning from an Ecuadorian archaeology professor as they talk about archaeology in Latin America for, I think that they're looking at about a 3-week. So just like really cool things just popping up from working and chatting together.
Yep. And we've had that happen many times, right? So we had one woman we were working with visit our class from the Amazon. She volunteered with a group down right at the mouth of the Amazon. They did holistic healing, and they worked with a lot of women and children because poverty and malnutrition are a huge, huge problem that they deal with there, especially with different places like this. We met so many immigrants and people who were refugees coming through this shelter. It was really an eye-opening experience. But one of the women that visited our class just online, then she wound up speaking for Bill Hunter and Elena Reese at one of the UN presentations they had to do, right? Because of her specialty in working with these displaced women and children. So it's just so many connections are made through doing this. It's really mind-boggling sometimes when I sit and I think of all what we've done in 3 years.
And so we showed off the pictures, but then we also wanted to show just the impact of using these resources at Lehigh, the impact that the students, these are all quotes from Lehigh students that experienced COIL. We're not going to read the whole thing, each quote, because we have a bunch of them, but to just like highlight some of the key points of like it helped them learn, understand different perspectives. And this is across cultural, also like technological engagement and things like that. Helping encourage collaboration among students. This was a big one. Teresa, I don't know if you want to talk about our student with this one.
Yeah, this was a student. His name is Chingiz. He is not a native English speaker, and he just said that his biggest takeaway from this was learning and thinking in other languages and beginning to think in English. So for him, the goal of the class is definitely, we focus on writing skills and critical thinking skills. I feel like students just have opportunities to get so much more from this. And this was something that he came to, like he had this, kind of revelation while we were traveling. And I just thought it was so wonderful that if he can, kind of take my class and his experiences in my class and the people from Lehigh and USFQ that he met and come to this as one of his biggest takeaways and how it helped him in his language learning, as his experiences here in the United States as a non-native speaker. I think that's amazing. It was such a meaningful, I don't know, side benefit or little plus to add on to the course.
Right. Yeah, that one. And then a lot of the students were talking about just the developing personal growth through this experience. making them understanding their strengths and weaknesses as being a team member, because everything that we had them doing, they were working together, but then working together with students in another country. So everything was online. There was across languages. For this version, Ecuador is actually in the same time zone as us. So it wasn't across time zones, but before we have worked with universities in different time zones. So then there's also that understanding of cross-time collaboration.
I think the other important thing with this is that when we reach out across campus and, I tell the students that we have so many people with so many different areas of expertise and research to share, that we're not just telling them they need to collaborate with this other school, right? Students they've never met in a country that many of them have never been to, but we're showing them collaboration, right? We're asking them to collaborate, but we're also modeling that for them, right? So I had never met Patricia before, and Elizabeth, before I went over and did tours over in Zollner and stuff. I had never, Stacy and I have worked together online, but this was my first time ever going and taking students down there into the center. So I think showing students that we're collaborating and we're pulling out of, pulling from each other's strengths and weaknesses is showing them what we want them to do in the end too. So I think that's another important benefit of networking across campus.
Yeah. And these were just some examples, but we wanted to highlight, and this was just like off the top of the head, every department that we touched base with, worked with to make this experience possible. So, we have the ones that we both work in, Cape, CITL, International Affairs, Pride Center, Study Abroad, LUAG, Zollner, Digital Media Studio, LTS with the librarians, LTS as a whole, Center for Gender Equity, International Students and Scholars, the UN Fellowship Advising, Transportation Services, getting students to and from places, renting vans, Global Citizenship. So just all these departments that we had to lean on to make this experience as positive for all the students as possible.
Yeah, it definitely is. There was a lot of moving pieces when they were here on campus. We had worked out a week-long schedule of different things for them to do. And again, I'm looking at Lehigh announcements and I'm pulling from things that I know routinely go on campus, that time of year. But again, if you have any ideas or, suggestions, if you're involved even personally with an organization that you think they could use help like this, maybe during spring break, I would love to talk to you about that. So, I can't possibly fill up an entire week for them on my own. And if I tried, they'd be very bored. So I appreciate all the help.
Sure. So we didn't want to take the full time because we want to open up if there's any conversations or questions. But to wrap up, when thinking about communities of practice, obviously we were coming from the angle of like, hey, we would love to work with you. So if virtual exchange or things like that sound like something that you're interested in, please reach out. But for collaborating across campus, like finding the level of commitment that works for you. Because sometimes, when you think about getting involved in certain things, we think about the big ball of, being on the planning committee, but even if you could just attend or things like that, it's so important. If you are interested in working with us for virtual exchange, Teresa mentioned that there's going to be a COIL happening in the fall. And then also the one that Teresa and I showcased, the USFQ one, is going to be in the spring. And you said we're likely going to focus on global health, right?
Yes, the theme, we're still working on some of the details, but it will, and that's a really broad, like an umbrella theme, global health, right? So I'm open to any suggestions. Kiki is the instructor at USFQ. She and I are actually going to be meeting in about a week to start working on our spring course for 2024. So as Chris said in the beginning, there is a lot of planning and that goes on, up front and negotiation. What does she want to get done? What do I need to get done? Our classes have different levels of English fluency, which is where that community of practice comes in. So if I find that there's some difficulty there that maybe I'm not really sure how to handle in regards to language, I kind of sit and bounce ideas off of Mark Roulette, right? So that's his specialty as well. When I had issues with plagiarism and getting them to use citations, I went to Elizabeth, right? So this is just, it's a huge, I said, it's kind of one of those examples of it takes a village to get a course like this off the ground. It really does need the help of so many different people on campus.
Yeah.
And
And if when watching this, if you think about like, oh, wouldn't it be cool, even if it's not something like, hey, you can work with my department, but like, hey, this random idea popped up, reach out to us, let us know.
or if you're thinking of maybe holding a class like this or something. I feel like a lot of times too, people that I meet on campus, I'm friends with, sometimes I feel like they don't realize like how helpful and engaging they would be in our classrooms or discussions. Sometimes I've worked with students, especially like Steve Sakowitz went with, our students did not even know we had a VR studio. Right. So I feel like also pulling in from different departments and inviting in guest speakers, it also gives students a better idea of the resources that are available to them on campus. And when they get to meet you and they see you, they put a face to the name. I feel like they, kind of warms up and breaks the ice for them so that they will come in and start visiting these different centers and resources and things like that too.
Yeah. 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 And seeing them across campus, because like the students that we traveled with, obviously we had more time to, that we had connections, but even like some of the students, so Teresa's directly involved with everything, being the instructor of the course, but for the students that didn't travel, sometimes I might have just been head on a Zoom or things like that. But even then, students, I ran into one in a coffee shop and he ran over, he's like, hey, how's it going? Things like that. Like, it's just great. If you're interested in starting your own community of practice, I do see we have a question. Lindsay, if you wanted to unmute and ask or talk, that'd be great.
Yeah. No, this is great. I'm in university communications, so I don't necessarily work with students directly. I had a couple of thoughts and a couple of questions. I think this is great. Like, I've worked at Lehigh for 10 years and I'm always like, had no idea any of this was going on. It sounds amazing. And I love like discovering new things that are happening. So it sounds fantastic. Couple of reasons that I attended this today is because I'm in university communications. I think I said that, and we're kind of kicking off, kind of moving to a marketing communications kind of broad group into more communities of practice. Where, in folks who do the work that I do might want to get together in small groups and talk about multimedia production or email marketing or content development. So I don't know I don't know if you would be open to a deeper conversation about how the heck you do that. I wrote down the link and I was like, I might have to steal this one slide. When we introduce this, we have a summit this summer that we're bringing all those folks together. It's about 100 people across campus who do that kind of work. And so we're going to be launching kind of communities of practice. So this is awesome.
Yeah.
And if you're open to it, I would love to be able to chat with a couple of you just more directly, because I've been charged with doing this and I'm really starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Well, I'm definitely down, and I'm always down to volunteer Teresa's time as well. So you can talk with both of us.
That's awesome. Okay. And then I thought about, I love just the community engagement and kind of that idea of my colleague and I, we used to call it because we work at a university. And it's like some of the things that are available to us, going to student art shows or going to things like that. I just think I love that you brought that into this too. So I thought that was a really good point. And then two things that, like, thinking about COIL and your program, one thing that we can do in university communications is tell these stories, right? We're the storytellers, we're the marketers. We want to tell people what's available at Lehigh, right? And so your program sounds amazing. I've never heard of it. And so, like, how can we tell that story and or partially connected to admissions, right? So these students are able to talk to other international students who might be thinking about coming to the US for an education, looking at Lehigh. That's another interesting thing that maybe students in the program have had a really good experience might want to share that. So those are just two things that came to mind.
We actually had a student from USFQ who, one of our students here at Lehigh is now planning to do a study abroad at USFQ, and the USFQ student wants to do a semester here at Lehigh. So
nice.
So that just came about. That I didn't even know anything about this. They were talking about it for a while, but when we were down at USFQ, she spoke with me and asked me, you know, what did I think about it? If we can just do these little exchanges and they meet, I think there's a lot of different stereotypes that go about coming to school in the United States, and sometimes they're not really sure what to expect. So I think when they meet me and Chris online and they meet the different, you know, visitors to our class, I just feel like it kind of gives them another perspective, right? And kind of opens them up to
Sure.
the idea of traveling here. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
really
Yeah.
cool.
And I can tell you that the students that we had all volunteered. They're like, any quotes or anything you need from us, let us know. So we'll definitely reach out to you and stay in contact, because that'd be awesome.
Well, good. Well, I will email you all about the community's practice, and then we can toss around, you know, students who may be appropriate for an interview, or, you know, we do the social media for Lehigh. So like, you know, we do international, or we do study abroad takeovers where they tell their story through the Instagram for Lehigh and stuff like that. So we can connect on both of those things. Thank you so much. This was really great.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a perfect lead into just the two last points there. So, you know, if what we're talking about sounds great, but it's like, well, what I'm interested in doesn't quite fit, you know, the VI, the virtual international exchange part, but you want to start your own, definitely you could reach out to us we could talk to you about like how we started ours. That is identifying like stakeholders and interested parties to get things going. That last point, I wanted to put that in there because like we've been meeting for almost a year now. Sometimes, you know, we'll host workshops and the attendance will be 9 people, things like that. So it's like that immediate, don't expect like this immediate result. It's a slow build, getting the word out there, getting the interest going, but finding ways to keep interacting with the campus. So it's worked out. Our community of practice, our meeting committee has met probably about, what do you say, Teresa, about like 5 times each semester or so, but then also talk through email and Slack and things like that. But then we've done about, I think, 3 workshops each semester for anyone that's interested.
Kathleen, did you want to say something?
I just had a question about funding. You know, how do you pay for all this?
The community of practice, paying for the meetings and stuff, or you mean the chill?
Travel and all, you know, you went to New York and all the different, you know, that costs money.
Again, that is another collaboration there. The community of practice itself, I mean, other than, you know, rotating who pays for maybe lunch, because let's face it, food gets people there. And that's really for the community of practice. That's really the only expense we've run into that. To just do the COIL, there's really no expense, right? So to do the exchange virtual, doing it online, there isn't really an expense with that. When we added in the chill, yeah, now we're adding in a little bit more. We had to do some planning there. So I had submitted a grant for some funding through the CITL grant, and we agreed. We used some of their new technology. Chris and I were partnered on that. That's why the students were using Uptail, which is wonderful if you're looking for a software to do any kind of like demonstration videos or anything like that. The other thing that we had gotten as students were in this class were also selected through Passport to Success. So some of them did have some travel grants through campus funding. I know for the spring, the College of Health has been in discussions with Mark about how many of their students they will be sponsoring to go to Keto, and we plan to work with Passport again. So there are some students who are fully funded. Other students, they decided to pay on their own. We try to keep the cost down as much as we can, which I think it was pretty reasonable for spring break. But to go into the city, we had used some of the grant money from the CITL grant because they were also collecting data for their Uptail videos. So images, things like that from the UN speech, going to see the play. And then we also, some students were partially funded, some were funding on their own if they wanted to go. So there's a lot of, it was like a game of shells of money, moving it around.
Yeah.
I did submit for another grant through Course Hero, is one of the grants I have gotten for the club last year. So Jessica and I did submit a grant through them again for $2,000 that should help with any kind of travel or, you know, different activities that we would do here as well. Fingers crossed.
Well, I mean, Teresa and I are definitely down to hang out if you have any more questions or comments, or you could reach out to us afterwards if anything comes up, later today, something comes, pops in your head you want to ask. But I just wanted to thank everyone for attending. Teresa and I love doing this. So anytime we have the chance to talk and engage with more of campus, we're going to jump at it. So thank you for being here. And if you're ever interested in working with us, that'd be wonderful. Thanks to Justin for being our ERAC rep and monitoring that side. And thank you again for attending. Hopefully there's some awesome offerings at 11 for Staff Development Day. So hopefully some of those jump out at you, and we hope to see you around campus.
Thank you. Feel free to email us if you have any questions or you would like to get involved.
I will be. Thank you.